Good day and welcome to Mr. Wilson Live. We are streaming out of Kingston, Jamaica. It's another Wednesday evening, and to my many teachers across probably the world, I want to say Happy Teachers Day, and I do hope that you were treated by your students or the administration today. We have a pretty interesting lineup today. In a matter of fact, we're supposed to be having two shows today, but things do happen. I give thanks, however, that I am here to have at least the first show, and we're going to continue to get better as we go along. We're expecting CXC to publish come Monday, that's next Monday, the broad topics for the various exams. Might I remind you that despite broad topics will be published, the CXC continue to remind us that we are going to be tested on the entire syllabus for the multiple choice paper. So be that our petition, they are successful or otherwise, we are sure that CXC we're sure that CXC would have made their position clear that the entire syllabus will be tested on the multiple choice paper. With that said, I want to remind us that we have to use all the resources available to get ourselves ready for the exams. It makes no sense for us to say that we are going to be sitting out this year and wait on next year, because the world, in fact, is not really in the pause mode. The world is still moving, but there are some persons who continue to procrastinate, and those persons are delaying and find all the excuses for solution. But let me remind us that in real life, what really matters is the result and not the reason. What really matters in life is the result and not the reason. So again, I welcome you from wherever in the Caribbean you are. I really am really happy that you're here with me this evening. And of course, I am really happy to be here with you. This evening, we're going to be looking at some diseases that are associated with food. We're going to be looking at foodborne disease. That's pretty much disease that's really passed and transmitted in food. And of course, the importance of hygiene, as it were, for our daily lives. Now, we would have heard from COVID that we're supposed to be wearing masks, we're supposed to wash our hands, but I continue to say these were always things that we were supposed to have been doing prior to COVID, during COVID, and even after COVID, practicing proper hygiene. But we tend to only remember proper hygiene when there is a problem. When there is a problem, we remember all the things we should have done and the things that we have not done. So let it not be like that moving forward. If you have siblings, if you have children, please help them to practice proper hygiene. Etiquette is also another very important thing for us to practice, but we're going to start with hygiene. So good evening to Cheryl, good evening to Kimona, good evening to Jawawan, and I also want to say good evening to Dana folks, my student from Jamaica. Welcome to the show, and let's hop right into the lesson. In our last show, we looked at waterborne disease, and we should have looked at gastroenteritis. But gastroenteritis is one of those diseases that you will pretty much find in many different domains. Now, if we were supposed to think about typhoid and cholera along with amoebic dysentery or amoeba dysentery, those three diseases are associated with gastroenteritis. So persons who suffer from any of these diseases, along with other types of disease, will of course be exposed to gastroenteritis. And this pretty much affects the intestine. It could pretty much cause inflammation of the stomach. It could cause inflammation of the intestine or other parts of the intestine. It could cause a person who is experiencing the disease to suffer from diarrhea and also pain in the abdomen. So, of course, gastroenteritis is one of those diseases that you want to ensure that you are not exposed to. And one of the things to ensure that you are not exposed to the disease is to ensure that you practice proper hygiene. Now, as a result of the inflammation, we might or we could or we will, as a result, be exposed to toxin that is definitely going to be in the intestine, and we could also be exposed to ulcer. Now, all of these, the ulcer, the toxin, is as a result of a pathogen that we would have been exposed to as a result of what we say these diseases, typhoid, cholera, dysentery, and they would pretty much cause the gastroenteritis. And of course, with gastroenteritis, the common thing for most persons, what most persons will know about, is the diarrhea. The pain in the abdomen is also something that is common with gastroenteritis. The pain, the diarrhea, of course. Now, the treatment is proper hygiene. Because we're having diarrhea, you know that we're going to be dehydrated, so rehydration fluid might be needed. Depending on the level of what is happening, you might also vomit, but vomiting is sort of secondary. It will happen in some cases, but it depends on the degree of the gastroenteritis and how quickly you made that decision to visit your healthcare practitioner. All right, so proper hygiene is very, very important. Good evening, Tanisha. Welcome to the show. I saw your message yesterday about that video I had published yesterday. Thanks so much for continuing to watch those videos and provide the useful comments. All right, good. So we want to look a little bit at foodborne disease, right? And when we talk about foodborne disease, the fact is that these are diseases that are carried or transported by food. So foodborne diseases refer to diseases that are carried or transported by food. Now, when we think about foodborne disease, the bike skin passing. When we think about foodborne diseases, we cannot ignore that insect that is called a fly. Some persons might say the housefly, some person might say flies, but this insect is very, very important. An insect or an organism for us to study once we're going to be talking about foodborne disease. There are, of course, major concern in this arena. Now, the storage of food, as it were, for foodborne disease is also going to be another major thing for us to look at in dealing with foodborne disease. Foodborne diseases, they are most time associated with bacteria, and once the food is affected by bacteria, usually by improper storage, one, or the presence of flies in the area, or probably a windy area, and the food is not covered, or the utensils they are not covered, then we could expose ourselves to foodborne disease. Now, food become poisoned by bacteria contaminants. That's a major thing I said with foodborne disease. Now, these bacteria can be destroyed by high temperature, like boiling. So if we cook the food properly, if food has been cooked properly, we could get rid of some of these pathogens. And then the likelihood of us being affected by foodborne disease would have been reduced. Now, another important fact is that if the food is well stored and the bacterium is that bacterium would have released that toxin on the food, even if we were supposed to eat the food at high temperature, it would not remove the toxin. Where am I going with this, as it were, for food poisoning? If you were supposed to have some food on the stove overnight, or you probably left it there from last night and you were supposed to have it after you get home from work, this could be recipe for death. it could be recipe for food poisoning. Because yes, you are going to say, I am going to eat this food, and once I heat this food properly on my stove in the microwave, it will of course kill the pathogen. Yes, it will or might kill the pathogen. However, however, it will not remove the toxin. And that's a toxin that would have been released by bacteria, or we might say bacteria. I mean, in this case, it's going to be bacteria. All right. So the toxin there will still cause debilitating effect. It will still cause you to become ill. So don't go around and say, okay, the food was properly covered. There is no fly. The buildup of microorganisms because of the nutrient content and the temperature could, of course, expose you to uh, harmful effects. And that's one of the things we need to bear in mind, that when it comes to protecting food or food care, to place it in a refrigerator at a lower temperature, that might allow the food to have a longer shelf life as is seen in the supermarket. Okay, great. Now, effects of foodborne disease. I would have seen your message, Jawawan. Effects of foodborne disease. You are going to have pain in the abdomen. It's only natural you're going to end up with gastroenteritis. And if we talk about gastroenteritis, then we know that we're going to have diarrhea. And if we talk about diarrhea, as it were, for gastroenteritis, only if this disease persists that we are going to have vomiting. So only in some cases where we are poisoned by food, we're going to have vomiting. In some cases, we might not. The danger here lies in the fact that if you have shared this food with an infant, then it could result in death. Thus to say, do not practice sharing your overnight food or your Sunday Monday with minors. If you do, you might be preparing yourself for 5 persons or 10 persons, wherever you are from in the Caribbean, to attend a funeral. And we really don't want that. All right? So do not give your kids this leftover food. You might be setting up yourself for some trouble. All right? And remember, if you are going to store the food, store it at the appropriate temperature. Now, as it were, food poisoning. When we talk about food poisoning, we're not talking about persons carrying arsenic and adding to the food. We're not talking about persons adding poison to the food. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the introduction of pathogen or harmful organism to the food. When we talk about the diseases associated with food, or when we talk about foodborne disease. Now, most times, as it were, for this disease, foodborne disease, it would pretty much find itself around areas where a whole lot of cooking or large preparation is being done for a whole lot of persons. In these areas, usually, if proper hygiene is not followed, if hands are not properly washed, then it is likely that persons could expose themselves to food poisoning as a result of pathogen, as a result of bacteria being a part of the dish that you now have. I know that persons would, of course, order some mushroom, which is, of course, a fungus, but I've never heard of anybody ordering a plate of bacteria. I've never heard that. So you want to ensure that you are practicing proper hygiene at all times. And if you realize that you're having abdominal pain, if you realize that you are vomiting or digesting, then you should make every effort to see a medical practitioner. All right? If you're having diarrhea, if you're having belly pain, if you're vomiting, And in some cases, the muscles are going to feel really weak. You might have the cold sweat effect if it were food poisoning, and you might or you will lose appetite. You might not want anything to eat, or if you eat because you pretty much have an unsettled stomach, you might feel as if you want to vomit. All right. So because of that, most persons would stay away from food once they have been poisoned by the food. That takes us into the whole arena with the housefly. Now, the housefly is an insect vector, pretty much like the mosquito. It's one of those vectors that the syllabus for human and social biology and biology wants us to look at. It's very important to look at it because the housefly has economic importance, like the mosquito, as the housefly could, of course, cause your life. And as it were, for farmers, it could really, really cost them a whole lot when their animals, as we would say in Jamaica, the animals take fly or the fly start living off the flesh of the animal. You understand that this is going to be a parasitic experience for the animal. The animal could be really, could become anemic as a result of the larvae feeding from the organism. And of course, it is feeding and multiplying at the same time. So if not treated, then you understand that this organism could pretty much pass away in short order. The life cycle of the housefly become very, very important. And when we talk about the life cycle of the housefly, for those persons who are doing agriculture, you might be familiar with the term complete metamorphosis, or you might think about the flea with incomplete metamorphosis. But as for the housefly, it's a complete metamorphosis. And it's very important to note here how quickly or how fast the housefly reproduce. Just let me pause to just introduce persons to my platform. It's CSEC Biology TCP, and of course, it is operated by TCP Academy. That's another platform that we have. It's a paid platform for those persons who feel like they would love to contribute to my growth. You could just go over there and pay for a program, even if you don't want to watch it. Or if you want to make some donation, you could, of course, send it through Western Union. However, to access the content on my platform, you would see to the top right of the screen somewhere there, you'll see a little white icon for most of my videos. It has a inverted exclamation sign, and that gives you the suggested video or the video that will come up next or should come up next. Then below, somewhere to the right, down here, you are going to see a yellow button there to the, should I say the right of your screen, and that will say TCP Academy, or it will say TCP, CSEC Biology TCP. If you click on that, you are able to subscribe as well. Just below that, below the video, you will also see a subscription button. Click on that subscription button and there's a bell beside it. You can click that bell, select all, and you'll be able to be notified whenever there is a new publication. Now, to the left of the screen, there is a blue icon, circular blue icon that says TCP, CSEC Biology TCP. Click on that icon and it will take you to the back end of the channel where you can access some 200 and something videos on biology and HSB. So I have a whole lot there for your use. Make sure that you visit the back end and make use of all the resources that are available. There's past paper, there's notes, there are labs, there are a whole lot of things there to assist you with getting ready for your CSEC examination. As it were for this program, we are on air on a Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday at 5:05 p.m. And we're streaming from Kingston, Jamaica. Thanks much for watching and continue to watch. So the mosquito tend to have 4 stages in its life cycle. Egg, I like to start from, larvae, pupae, and then adult. In 2010, I had some students doing biology, and as they prepared for the exam, they were preparing to draw I think it was a mosquito life cycle that they were drawing. And one of my students, who is now a doctor, he, in his preparation, was actually drawing the egg It was drawing the larvae and actually drawing the mosquito. Now, please note, in an examination, you don't need to draw the actual egg. You don't need to draw the actual larvae. You don't need to draw the actual be it a fly or mosquito. Writing the name for each stage is all right. All right? Probably if you draw it, or you'll become a doctor because my student is now a doctor and I'm still a teacher. So probably that's a good move. But you really don't need to do that. You might just be losing some time. So we have the eggs, we have the larvae, we have the pupae, we have the adult, and it's pretty much the same case as it were for the mosquito. What is interesting here is the length of time that the mosquito, that the fly would move through each stage. So let us start. The adult will be able, will pretty much mate as soon as it emerges from the pupal stage. And within about 4 days thereafter, then it will be laying. So emerge, mate, 4 days later, they are eggs. Now we understand here that the adult is going to lay anywhere between 100 or probably 150 or somewhere within that region. That's the number of eggs. Now they will lay this egg on things like feces. They will lay it on carcasses. They will lay it on just refuse just about anything that will support their life form. They will lay the egg on that. Now the egg is going to hatch within 24 hours. The egg will hatch within 24 hours. Now the egg will hatch and then it will move within a stage that we call the larvae stage. All right. And of course, the larvae is going to, of course, live pretty much the same place that the egg was laid. So if the egg was laid pretty much in a wound on an animal, or if it was laid in a feces, or if it was laid pretty much on the remains of an animal, the larvae will, of course, develop there. Now, between about 3 to 11 days, the larvae will change into pupa. Within about 3 to 11 days, the larvae will change into pupae. Now, the pupae or pupa, whichever you are more comfortable to say, it will stay there for about 3 to 6 days, after which the pupae will emerge as an adult that is ready to cause some more destruction. So what I've just done, I would have just described the life cycle of the I keep saying mosquito. I would have just described the life cycle of the housefly. Remember, to do your CXC paper, you can use a well annotated diagram as a description. All right. I do hope that we are following. I do hope that we understand. We're looking at the housefly, which can be really, really toxic on us if we are not practicing proper hygiene. Now, we like to say that the housefly is of economic importance, and we talk about economic importance not because it is good. Now, economic importance could mean that it is good, but we talk about it because it will cost us some money. It will cost us some time. It will cost us some smile if we fail to practice proper hygiene. So the importance here of the housefly is that it transmits pathogen that causes food poisoning or could cause disease. That's the economic importance here. And in doing so, the fly has no limitation. It will move from an area, it will move from feces to food, it will move from food to feces. It will move from a carcass to food and just about anywhere. And it is doing this and transmitting the pathogen from one area to another when it crawls. When it flies, it might just have some dropping falling on that which you were eating. It might have the little hair on the body being shed on the food. As it lands on the food, that too will help to transfer or move pathogen from the area that it picked up the pathogen to your food. So the flies, they are dangerous, whether they would have perched on the food or whether they are flying over the food or pretty much just being in the area. The wind, the dust, particles falling from them and being taken by the wind to your food, that could be a really dangerous. Could of course cause your health, could of course cause you your life. An interesting thing about the housefly that is somewhat similar to the mosquito and probably somewhat similar to the honeybee is that the housefly has what is called a proboscis. Now, the proboscis is like a straw. So it's like a straw that it releases from the mouth part or it unfolds from the mouth part. It's curled and unfold from the mouth part. And whatever it is that the fly wants to feed on, it will just lower the proboscis and, of course, secrete some saliva. Now, the saliva, as it were, for the housefly could contain the pathogen. So it will secrete its saliva onto whatever it wants to eat because the housefly is doing the digestion on the outside. So the saliva having been secreted on whatever it wants to consume, it will then pretty much pull it up in the proboscis, pretty much into the stomach, and of course continue its very merry way. Now, while it would have gone the food that it needed, it is going to leave behind a trail of destruction. Now, another special thing about the housefly is that they tend to have these special legs that allow them to stick to the ceiling, stick to the wall, stick to whatever surface. They tend to also have what we call some glandular pods on the legs. And these pods tend to be a haven for the pathogen when they land on these surfaces that are not so safe. These surfaces would have been contaminated by pathogen, disease causing agent, and they are just lurking there to cause you some time, money, your health, and probably your life. Now, the houseflies being so dangerous, they are being associated with so many different diseases. How do we control the housefly is probably a question that a lot of person would love to ask. Now, I'm going to ask Tanisha, how do you control flies over there in Guyana? Tanisha, how do we control flies in Guyana? Jawawan, you are in Trinidad. How do you control flies in Trinidad? Martin, you are in St. Vincent, aren't you? Dana Folks, Shakila Lewis, how do you control flies in Jamaica? Tell me about the different ways you control flies. Of course, your text would say something, but how do you control flies or how do you repel flies in your local domain? All right, so while I wait on my students to participate in the lesson, of course, there are many ways of controlling flies. I know that in Jamaica, there are some plants that are used as a repellent. I think our national flower, the lignum vitae, is used to repel fly. Interestingly, I've also seen you use a broom. Okay. Interestingly, I have also seen amoy, proper disposal of human and animal waste. We're not there as yet, Amoy. That is true. But what I want to know, if you were supposed to, you know that during mango time, they tend to say that we have a lot of flies. How do you get rid of these flies? Because it is true, during mango time, we have a lot of flies. How do we rid ourselves of a fly problem at home? What do you do, Amoy, to get rid of these flies? Use insect spray. All right, I know a lot of person would use this aerosol, and of course, they would of course help to control the flies. But if you have food or children in the area, I don't know that aerosols, these sprays would have been the best thing to use. Tanisha, using animals that feed on them. What animals we have that feed on flies? I don't know. Is it lizard? That sounds like you're using a biological control. You want to tell me any animal that you know would be feeding on the fly? All right, there's a lot of things. I know that in Jamaica, as it were, to control the screwworm fly, they were using a sterilization process where I think the males, they did something, some genetic modification to the males, and then they release them in the wild. And of course, that should cause some sterility and reduce the number of flies being, should I say, hatched? Good. Macmillan, first thing I want to know is where they come from. As I open my window, they reach, swarm my room like they were just outside waiting. I spray them down or they crack my window. Okay. The fly infestation that you speak of, Macmillan, is it that they are always there? Macmillan, you're in St. Vincent. Just remind me where you are. Is it that they are always there? Kevin, sir, all organic food particles attracting flies can be removed from there. Yeah, but we are not there yet now. One of the things we have to understand when it comes to controlling these vectors, they tend to have different stage of their life cycle. So when we are going to remove, yes, we're going to remove the breeding site. But I am not there yet. I want to talk about you have visited an establishment and you are seeing a lot of flies. Are you at home and everything is all fine? And then tomorrow morning when you wake up, there's a fly infestation. How do you treat with it in your local domain? I'm not really talking about the textbook thing now. I just want, this is like an immersion of culture. How do you deal with it where you are from? I once see someone fill. That is the one I was thinking about, Amoy. I once see someone fill a bag with water. They said it keep the fly away. I have seen that. So you just get like a 2 pound plastic bag, a transparent bag, fill it with some water and tie it and put it down. And I heard that it keeps the fly away. Can anybody tell me about that? Yes, frogs would be eating flies. Frog would be eating bees. But because flies really don't fly that low, I don't know that because flies really don't fly that low. I don't know if frogs would have been really effective in controlling flies. But I do know that it's an insect and the frog will just pretty much catch them with that specialized tongue. Felix, to control the number of flies is using water and dilute vinegar. Oh, yes, some person, and I think it is better and safer if you're having this fly infestation wherever you have kids or have food, then it would have been better to add some water to the vinegar, put it in a spray bottle, and spray around. You wouldn't be hurting the child, I think, and you wouldn't be poisoning the food. So I think this is also a good method of treating with them when you find them in area too much. We're going to talk about what happens before they got to that level. But we want to know what happens if we were supposed to have a fly infestation, how we would have treated with that. No, I am in Trinidad. So Macmillan is still in Trinidad, but I think there is a problem where I am at now too. Sure, what's causing it? Well, it is mango time. So one of the things we know that is that mangoes are around, and if we're having flies like that, it is very important that we report this to the local health authority because a lot of things could cause us to have flies. For those persons who are doing biology, and we talk about what causes the growth of any population when the conditions are ideal, adequate food, adequate space, adequate shelter, adequate partner to mate with, low predator, then what will happen is that the organism will bloom. And when this organism blossom, what is going to happen is that you're going to have the condition that you're having. So if you're having more flies than normal, I suggest that you call your local health authority and tell them that you're having this problem. It could mean that these flies are migrating from somewhere, probably, I don't want to call any country name, but probably country A is having a problem over there that makes the environment less conducive for these flies. As such, they are migrating to find safer haven. So the persons who are doing biology, this is a very good biology question when we look at the sigmoid growth curve. What could have caused the influx of flies in Trinidad where Macmillan is versus no flies where Letitia Francis is in Jamaica? And when it rains, they are few. Now, when it rains, that is pretty easy. Now, the environmental factors there, it's not favorable. So what is going to happen is that the water that is associated with the rain will not allow the wings to move like they should. So what is going to happen? The flies are not stupid. The flies will know that it is raining outside. This could cost me my life. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to find somewhere and shelter. When I get inside this area, I'm just going to be all calm and settle down and wait until the rain would have passed, then I can start giving some trouble. So during that time, you'll realize that the flies will perch. You'll see them like on the wall and so on and so forth, and they're not flying as they normally would. Because of course they don't want you to kill them. When they think they can get in and out, they'll do that very quickly. All right, Reverend Adrian Ellis. Hi, sir. This is Mr. Ellis from Jamaica. I am also a human and social biology teacher. Great. Could you WhatsApp me, please, after this session? All right. If you observe, no one else can see your message. Please be reminded you are not supposed to send your number via this method. There is a email address on my channel. You can go there, get that email address, and you can email me whatever your concerns are. Usually that's how I tend to deal with the online stuff. I never usually use telephone number. So just go there and email me. And once you email me, I will respond. Everybody will tell you I respond. In most cases, I do. When time allow me, I do. All right. So just go over to the email and just say the same thing you are, Reverend, whatever, and email the concerns that you are having or what you'd love us to talk about. All right. I'll be very happy to talk to you. I enjoy talking to everyone, more so teachers, as I have been saying. I said it to my class today. All right. Amoy Lawrence. But I have lost a mango tree, but I don't have. Oh, you have lots of mango tree, but I don't have a fly problem. All right, let us look at this. You're a HSB student, so this is something for the environmental science student to solve and the biology students to solve. You have a lot of mango trees. Do you have a lot of ripe mango falling off the tree and they're just lying there under the tree? Yes or no, Amoy? We're doing a little lab here. All right. Uh, yes. Don't think mango is the reason by me. Well, like I said, I don't know if the eruption in St. Vincent, I don't know if this could have been the reason, but there are times when we are seeing the influx of some organism, and sometimes we really can't explain what is happening. So the environmentalists, they have to go out. There was a year when we were having a whole lot of uh, um, caterpillars in the farms in St. Elizabeth in Jamaica. And as to what was happening, we're not sure. And there's a time in Jamaica when we have a whole lot of butterflies. This is biology now. We have a whole lot of butterflies. And some of these things, they go periodically. We tend to know the time when we're going to have the influx. I don't know if you know what would have happened in Trinidad at this time, but you could probably ask your neighbor, is this common? Is this what usually happens this time of the year? What do you think is causing this problem? And like we said, what we're dealing with here, the topic, we're dealing with two things here. We're looking at the food web and we're looking at the sigmoid growth curve, at the factors that would have driven population growth, right? So we're doing a little biology here and we're doing a little HSB. For those persons who don't understand this breakaway that we're taking, it is biology. All right, good. So, great, Reverend. Good evening to you, and I'm very happy you're here. Not really. There we go, Amoy. There we go. For the bio students who would have looked at the sigmoid growth curve, you are going to understand that wherever you are going to have an abundance of any organism, it is as a result of having a number of factors favorable. If you were supposed to look at my video on the video I have out there on the quadrant, in that video, I would have explained a whole lot of driving force or factors that influence the growth of a population. So you obviously don't have enough mangoes over there for you to have the flies. And you could have a lot of mangoes, but the temperature is not ideal, or the wind speed is not ideal, or your hygienic practice there, it is like way up to par. So the flies just really, hey, I can't go over here. I'm not going to have any food. I'm not going to have any nice time. I won't be able to have a ball. She used too much detergent over there, the noise over there, all sorts of other factors could cause the flies not to be there. We're having a discussion around flies, and we're looking at the food web, and we're looking at population growth curve for biology, because this is a topic that really covers both biology and HSB. I will show in my own question, as it were, for the food web as we go along. All right, let me see what Felix is saying here. Sometimes there is a disruption with the sewage waste, and that can cause household flies. And the truth is, this is a big topic to talk about, as it were, for sewage. I have visited Soapberry in Jamaica. It's probably one of our biggest sewage plant in Jamaica. But I can't remember having visited any sewage treatment plant and see flies. I have never seen it. I don't know if you have ever visited a sewage treatment plant and see a fly. I have never seen one. And it's sewage they have there, and I have never seen a fly at a sewage treatment plant. I have visited one, two in Longsville, Soapberry. I know about Waterford. I have never ever really seen flies there. So we probably need to look at the hygienic practice at the sewage plant. I know that when sewage plant tend to go down, there is this pungent odor. But as to say that seen a fly, I don't know that the authorities would allow that to happen, because that could be a major problem for your island. But things do happen. All right. Things do happen. We might pretty much have sewage flowing on the road, and a lot of things could happen, right? There is no clear-cut thing as to what will or could happen. All right, so let me just show on something on Tanisha and the other biology students here before I run along. If we spoke about the, I think it's called inoculation, or the release of the sterilized flies into the environment. Now, so over time, what is likely to happen is that we are going to have less flies. What impact is this likely to have on a food web, or on the food web? Can anybody tell me? How will it affect other organisms? If we were supposed to, in my class this morning, some students said that they would kill. We were talking about phobias, we were talking about mental illness, and a student said that if he could, he would actually kill all the spiders and a couple of other organisms. If we were supposed to wipe them out totally, would it have any impact on the food web? Yes or no? That answer is fine. Yes or no? And I'm coming back to the control of house flies, but we need to understand what is happening around us and why it happened. Another thing that we could think about, if we have the garbage build up on the outside and the rubbish truck don't come in time, the garbage truck doesn't come to collect it on time, then we are going to be seeing some flies as well. Trust me on that. If a garbage truck doesn't pick up on the day that it usually pick up, you are going to see more flies in your community. Good. Tanisha, biodiversity can differ as many animals depend on the fly as their food, which is seen in the food chain and pretty much a food web. Very well, Tanisha. So when we remove one organism from the food web, because we are so closely intertwined, another organism might suffer. Now, what will happen? Two things is likely to happen. When it comes to removing any organism from a food web, only two things can happen. Listen to the two things can happen. Well, probably it's three, or probably it's two, but I'll tell you all that can happen. If you remove organism A, or if you remove organism B, organism A might find something else to feed on. That is likely to happen. Another thing that is likely to happen to organism A is that organism A might migrate. And there's no food here for me, so let me go somewhere else to find food. Now, if organism A is too weak to migrate, and CXC will ask it to suggest what will happen here, because we can only suggest, we don't know what will happen. Another thing that is likely to happen to organism A in this case, if we were supposed to look at organism A being the panda bear that has this niche, this diet, one thing it eats, if you were supposed to remove that thing from the habitat, then the likelihood of the organism dying and eventually moving into the extinction vortex is greater. All right, so three things could happen. One, migrate. Two, find another food source. Or three, die. All right, so we want to ensure that even though we are removing some flies and we said that we are supposed to kill the flies and so on, remember, we are going to affect the ecosystem. So the most suitable thing I would suggest, not your textbook, the most suitable thing that I would suggest as an environmentalist is to keep them at a proportion that is sustainable, not to wipe them totally out. All right, flies also limit the growth of human species. And that is when they are at a proportion more than is environmentally tenable. Because at that time they are causing disease, at that time they are causing the death of human. That is so true. I see you digging up a whole lot of ecology there, Tanisha. Do your thing, my girl. All right, so here we go again with the control of a housefly. As it were with the adult, we could kill the adult with insecticide. And I think Tanisha or somebody, Dana or somebody like that said we are going to use spray. And there's a whole slew of spray out there that you can use. We could use swatting, some electric something or something like that. Some persons use an electric thing and some persons just use a broad thing and just kill them like that. And that is not a cushy to kill them like that. And then there is also the proper hygiene. Then we cannot forget, I don't like this one any at all. It is like really, really a sore eye. If you call me, it's more like visual pollution. When we use a fly tape, you tape up this thing and the flies stick on it, and then it is there for a couple of days. It's like you have a cemetery inside your house or your kitchen or wherever, or in your restaurant. I don't like to see it. But let us also be reminded that there are some special lighting that we can use that will pretty much just, the fly will fly into it and it will burn. I think the bio students who are doing ecology, when you did ecology, you would have looked at some of these equipment in the early days. All right. You could also use a fly net. I didn't even remember that. You could use a fly net to cover the food. You could use a fly net to cover the baby. All of that. You could use nets on the windows and door. But what we want to do, we want to keep the fly population at a level that is sustainable, that it will not hurt us, but other organisms will continue to have food. All right. Another thing that we could do, we could destroy or remove the breeding site for the flies. Now, you would have heard Amoy saying earlier, I don't remember what she said, but she alluded to something like this to say that, I think she said that you could just get the proper hygiene, clean up your area, bury the dead. Because if you don't bury the dead, I mean, that is like delicious food for the flies and pretty much a wonderful breeding site if you are not burying things that are dead and if you are not pretty much controlling that organic waste that they would find to be nutrient filled. So you have to ensure that all that is taken care of. Now, another thing is the prevention of, we'll talk about now prevention of contamination. So we don't want the flies to affect the food. So we can use, somebody say mosquito net, use a fly net to keep them out. But remember, if they fly over and they were supposed to poop, then what is going to happen is that the droppings will fall on the food, and that too could be a problem. They really don't have to poop flying across. They have some little air on their body and so on. And that could just break off and fall on the food. And that could be pretty much a haven for pathogen. And that being on your food could also cause some problem. So we have to practice proper food storage. Now, you will go into some places and you'll see like the rotisserie chicken in this thing, and it's all eaten. I almost had an accident yesterday. I didn't even tell my son's mother. I went into the supermarket and I was allowing him to walk and all of that. And he's like this touchy thing, discovery type of guy. And he went and he touched the rotisserie chicken machine, but there was no chicken in it. I thought that it was cool, and I went over and I touched the top shelf. It was a little warm. It didn't burn him anyhow, and I thought that that was a safety issue in the supermarket, because kids will walk, anybody could touch it and didn't know that it was hot because there was no chicken in it. All right. So you would see the rotisserie machine with that heat to keep the flies out. You'd see the fridge with the meat, the temperature there, even though it's open, no fly is going to go there because the flies are invertebrate. It controls its body temperature from external mechanism. So if it goes inside, it pretty much would, it wouldn't be a comfortable thing, and probably it would die. So a fly wouldn't be going in the fridge. So proper storage of food is very, very important. And the proper storage of food is extended to covering the food. It is also extended to putting the food in the refrigerator at the proper temperature and at the proper time. We're going to be looking at that when we talk about food hygiene. We're going to talk about that in another lesson, I think sometime next week. Then we want to talk about also proper storage of a utensil. So here it is. The food is all taken care of well, but guess what? The knife and fork was on the table and they were all seated there waiting on you to come. They are not all wrapped. And what is going to happen is that a fly might just pass by and say, hey, this shiny thing, this looks like really nice. I could check it out. And then the fly would have left something there. And you know, or you knew that the food was well prepared. But while the food was well prepared, the utensil wasn't properly taken care of. So you have to be careful that you're looking at that. I want to say, I want to go out on a limb and say very openly, if you go to an establishment and there's a lot of flies there, you could do better by spending your money somewhere else. You go to an establishment to get yourself some food and there's a lot of flies there, don't take the excuse that it is fly season. Don't take the excuse that I don't know what has happened. Take the excuse that you are just dealing with safety. All right? Not the excuses that will cost you or could cost you dearly. All right, so that is a lot said there on the host fly. For those persons who thought that if the fly didn't pitch on the food, as we would say, or perch on the food, everything is fine. Now you realize that flies can be really, really terrible, whether they would have perched on the food or not. Now we want to look at worms. Oh my. This might be a very ticklish thing for a lot of persons to talk about, more so if you have ever seen worms, if you have ever seen. But the other worms, oh my. The pinworm, guys, if you can't take this, probably you have to just mute the thing a little bit. The pinworm, for those persons who are in Jamaica and for those persons who know coconut, water coconut. I'm from the country, I'm now in the city. The pinworm tend to be something more like when you chew the coconut and you have that trash part in your mouth. It tend to be this little fine white thing, usually really, really fine, and not a good sight. It's not really a nice sight. But worms are so, we've spoken about pathogen being contaminating the food by the housefly, and not much mention would have been made about larger organisms like the worm. But we have worms like tapeworm, we have worms like roundworm, and they tend to enter the body at the stage of being egg, or in the egg stage. Now they tend to enter the body through food. And the sad thing about worms is that they may not be harmed by the high temperature or the temperature that we're used to cook, we're using to cook. So you're cooking and you think that, oh yes, it's all at the right temperature and all of that. When you're finished, you might still be exposed to worm because the eggs or the worm, it was not affected by that temperature. It's important to note that in most cases where we have the worm, it is actually because we had put it in our mouth. So it got into your mouth either by you putting it in there through your fingernail or your hands not being clean, or the wind and the dust would have blown it onto your food and you would have consumed. And that is why it might not be a good idea for you to go out during the course of the day. Now they are saying that nobody can go into a restaurant to eat. It is not a wise idea for you to fetch yourself a patty and you are walking on the road and you're eating. I know your parents would have said to you, don't walk and eat. And they probably would have said that ethically it's wrong. But if you think about hygiene, it is even worse because while you walk and you would have been eating your patty, then the wind is blowing, you are pretty much in open space. You might just be consuming some eggs for some worms. And the next thing you know, you start feeling some kind of way sick. So you would have been exposed probably to the pinworm, the same worm that we refer to as the threadworm. Now, these worms are very small, and you are going to see them because of their white color, but you might see them and ignore them because they are so small, they are white and small. They are called enterobius vermicu vermicularis. Vermicularis. That's what I think that's a scientific name. And they tend to move from the anus to the mouth, as persons tend to might probably feel a scratch and they itch that area, and it is on the clothing now, and it is on your hand, and it is my body. I am not dirty. I didn't go through a landslide, so I am not dirty, but the egg is there on you, right? And you are not even aware that probably you were exposed to this, and then you reinfect yourself, or probably you just touch something and the egg is on your hand. And that is why COVID is such a nice thing. I think persons might be getting euthanasia after COVID because we have been so sterilized during COVID that after COVID, when we go back to not washing our hands and all of that, we might just end up with another big disease. One of those Norwalk disease or one of those diseases that affect food and hygienic practice. All right, so when we tend to have the pinworm and the pinworm is passed out pretty much through the anus, it will tend to lay its egg in the skin around that area. Now, the pinworm tend to attach themselves to the intestine, and they attach themselves to the intestine with what we refer to as suck. And when they suck, they are pretty much reducing your nutrient and could pretty much lead you into a stage of anemia. Now, the eggs are able to move, like I said, by dust. They could be on your clothing, they could be on your bedding, and the worst part of it, it might be nice for you to be wearing mask. You could inhale these eggs in the wind. Yeah, you could just inhale them because you go downtown today. So I don't eat anything with worms or whatever. So you need to get your little checkup now and then. When I was a little boy and I lived in the country with my grandma, there is no way I could have gone back to school come September and I didn't get what they call at the time worm out. I don't know if we still practice that, but those persons, they couldn't explain the biology behind what they were doing, but pretty much they understood what they were doing. And of course, they would give you, I think those days we usually call it the mojo herb. Now we have fancy medication that we can just take from over the counter and drink, and then that would cause the worm to release itself from the intestine and of course be passed out in the feces. And providing that you wipe and wash your hands properly, then you should be able to break the cycle if you are using one of the modern toilets, or even if you are using a pit toilet that is properly secured, then you should be all right. Now, the effects of the worm is that it pretty much damages the intestine, and the individual is going to lose weight. So the person might become a little skinny. You're feeding them, but they are becoming skinny because they might say you have worm. And what I would have seen with persons suffering from worm, I spoke about that in some class before, is that they tend to have a lot of pimples on the skin, and they might have spots in the ear or ringworm in the ear and other stuff. But it tend to come with other stuff if you're really badly suffering from a worm infestation. Now, the worms could also cause diarrhea, and as I have said before, the worms will definitely cause some amount of what we refer to as anemia. How do we know that we have the worm? We could talk about signs of the worm. You're seeing the worm in the feces. That is possible. We could talk about itching around the anus area. If you're having the baby and you see the baby pulling the pampers and trying to itch that area, trust me, it is a good sign. Get the baby, sterilize the baby and properly. Probably you want to see the pediatrician, or probably you want to check to make sure that the baby is fine. But don't just leave that him like scratch him, always a scratch him. Always a scratch is not a normal behavior. So if you observe that the child is always scratching or itching, whichever one you want to use, make sure that you seek some medical help. The other thing is that I heard this growing up. You always a complain about you're hungry, you have worm. Move from here, so you have worm. That is Creole Jamaican. So usually when persons, most of children, are suffering from worm, they tend to get hungry very quickly, right? I heard I've heard it, move away and that type of thing. It's a very unfair and probably I say uncouth way to deal with this problem. We probably should try what my grandmother used to do as a child. My grandma used to have a pudding. I don't know how many persons know a pudding. My grandmother always have a pudding, so there was always something to eat. So my grandmother really didn't tell me at any time to move away, you do whatever. She would just give me the right remedy at the right time. Definitely you're going to be losing weight as a sign. But losing weight, don't go around and see persons losing weight and talk about they have a worm, there are many diseases that could have caused you to lose weight. Now, like I said, the diseases spread when you touch the anus or you wipe and you didn't wash and get into the mouth. Of course, not washing the hand is a big thing in moving the pinworm around. You could have inhaled the worm. I said that earlier. How to control it? Wash your hand, proper hygiene, and go and take the worm medicine. It won't kill you. Ask your doctor to assist you, or you could, of course, go to your over-counter. It is not like antibiotics. So I don't know that it will hurt you. Now, there's something else I wanted to look at, but this is a big topic, and I wanted to deal with this a little differently. I also wanted to do another topic this evening, but I was thinking that it is probably too much because the 2-hour class is too much. So I'm going to be doing something different for you this evening. We're at the 1-hour slot, so we would have covered that which we should cover. But I'm just going to be blabbing a little bit more before I leave. I am going to be talking, can they enter the body through uncooked food? Very well, that's where I'm going. So we're talking about worms, all right? And they could, of course, enter through food, like I said when we started out. Now, flatworm, in this case, we are talking about tapeworm. And let it be known that there are different types of tapeworm. Now, the popular tapeworm that we would talk about, as it were, for human is the one that is associated with the pig. But there are different types of tapeworm, but I think the effect is pretty much the same. Now, tapeworm tend to be flat worms, right? And they tend to enter our body through uncooked food or uncooked meat, when the meat is not properly cooked. In most cases, the victim here, we could get it from fish, we could get it from beef, we could get it from pork, but in most cases, the pork is the culprit. But you can't stop me from eating jerk pork. I love my jerk pork, and I'm going to have some the next time I pass somewhere that is really clean. All right, so you can stay the talk about. That's why you're not to eat pork. You're going to eat some more pork. All right. So the effect, I'm not going to be diving deep into flatworms. I'm going to be looking at that in another class. Is that the individual will become pale and the individual will become weak because, of course, it has a parasite that is feeding. Now, this type of parasite is called an ectoparasite. Endo, ecto, it's endo, right? Somebody remind me. It's an endoparasite. Endo inside, ecto outside. I forget things sometimes, so if I ask you to help me, help me. Don't make me talk foolish. You have a parasite could be ecto or endo. I think this is an endoparasite, the one that is inside. Nobody research it on Google and tell me what's an endoparasite yet? All right. When you find out what is endoparasite, put it in the chat so that everybody can be informed what's an endoparasite. The endoparasite is usually on the inside. The ectoparasite is usually on the outside. So a ticks is an exoparasite, and the endo is going to be like your hookworm. And the hookworm tend to live in conditions of the tapeworm here tend to live in conditions that are usually abiotic. So when we talk about organisms that live in abiotic condition, this is a good organism to talk about for that case. Now, prevention is going to ensure that you have properly cooked meat, not any raw meat. You're not a dog. Meat inspection. So when the health inspectors come around to find out about how your fridge, your storeroom, your meat, how you protect or preserve or protect people, make sure that they get full access. Now, proper disposal of feces, as somebody said earlier, I think it was Amoy, make sure that feces is properly disposed. And to treat with the worm, you can take medication, drugs. You notice I didn't say antibiotic, because some person take antibiotic for everything. You can, of course, take medication to have the worm released. But a thing about tapeworm, just a little bit more about tapeworm, is that the tapeworm is like a jointed tape. So just go to Google and see if you can type in tapeworm and look at what's a tapeworm. Look at all these practical stuff I would have said, because I don't give you a picture here. So if I say it, you just up on over to Google, type in tapeworm, up on over to Google, type in pinworm, and you'll see what they look like. This might be very good for you. Endoparasite is a parasite that is living internal organ. Yes, this one. Very well. All right, so we could use drugs to deal with that. Now, this is in no stretch of my imagination, the complete thing to talk about tapeworm. So we're going to be having some more talk about this worm the next time we meet. They live on the outside of the host. What lives on the outside of the host? So we're talking about endoparasite and ectoparasite. Okay, ectoparasite like flea. Very good. Ectoparasite is on the outside, endoparasite is on the inside. All right, so this is taking me right back to the first part of biology. And if I'm not careful, I start asking you some of those questions. I really don't want to do that now. All right, so we sent out some videos, and what we have been doing, we have it's a study that we're doing. We are trying to see what is really causing that disconnect in some schools between grade 7 or grade 6 and CXC. So you would have seen we would have sent out a pollination video. We would have sent out a parts of a flower video. Remember, please be reminded for the CXC level, the parts of the flower is a little more complex. There's a little more to cover. That video that we sent out was for grade 7. As it were for pollination, pollination is the same thing for CXC, and it's the exact thing they are doing at grade 7. So we're trying to find out what is the problem at grade 7, why when we get to grade 10 and so on, we don't know the content. So we're trying to get the students to come on the platform earlier so that, of course, they can have this content repeatedly. I had a student last class that was from Charlie Mount or something like that, Charlie Mount over there in Utensil, Linstead area. She's in grade 9. And that is what we're trying to do. We want to get students to come onto the platform earlier so that they will have more of a content, so that in return, we'll be seeing more students passing the subject with ones. All right, great. I have had conversation with some persons this week, content I would have had on my channel. Now, I am a teacher who invites, sir, you had 2 illustrated video on nephron. 2, I think I have 1 on nephron. I don't think it's 2. Or just 1. 1 I have on nephron. No, I only had 1 video on nephron, and that video was really skewed for CXC. We were pointing out the things that the CXC syllabus wanted. So the animation and that is just for CXC. It's not for any other syllabus. It's not for the GC syllabus. It is for CXC. So some person reach out to me, read some content I have on my channel, past papers. I have never boasted to be the keeper of knowledge, and I always welcome criticism of my work. Criticism caused Mr. Wilson to grow. I must say to these persons, I am really pleased they reached out to me, and it was in a mannerable format that they presented their case, not that I have accepted, right? Yes, I am going to remind the students, go through the multiple choice. What your teacher, you can even share my videos with your teacher. What your teacher would have said, I am in no position to tell you to disbelieve your teacher. I am always open to dialogue. There's a particular question on I think I got 3 questions, and I did explain how I arrived at my answer. For the genetic question, that has to do with tongue rolling and eye color. That is a tricky question. I don't remember if it is 43 or what number. It is a tricky question, and I would have 2 dots there. And usually I ask person to leave something in the comment if it's a question that bothers me. And that question bothers me, and it bothers me because of these 2 things. If we're going to use the law as to discontinuous variation and continuous variation to look at genetic versus environmental variation, that law is going to make your answer be B. If you are going to look at the fact that eye color is not influenced by the environment, it is solely genetics, then the answer to that question is going to be D. If D is going to be the answer which I selected, hold on, I don't tell you to take my answer, I'm giving you the explanation for 2. Your textbook would support the answer to be B because the law in your textbook said that. But if you look at what is being said about tongue rolling is not pure genetics. Tongue rolling can be learned. So as you go along and you would have seen your friends rolling their tongues, you start to hold on your tongue, and after some time you are able to roll your tongue just like your friends. However, tongue rolling will continue to be a discontinuous variation because when it comes to tongue rolling, it is either you can roll your tongue or you can't roll your tongue. So the question is a little tricky. Now, while I would have selected D, I am not going to stick up any student or teacher to tell them that B is incorrect. That is what I chose, and that is my support. And I do understand from where the textbook comes, and persons would have selected B. So I'm not running away from it. Now, there's another question that I was asked about. I don't remember what question it was. I think it's on the 2020 paper. But that one was clear cut. The answer there was no question as to whether or not my answer is. Oh, I remember now. And I'm going to ask you the question. Is sore throat a sign or a symptom? Is sore throat a sign or a symptom? And this is a question I think it was on the 2020 paper. All right, so go through the papers with your teacher, go through the papers with your friend. If you have something that you don't understand or you think that I have an answer there that is right or wrong, feel free to ask me. But guys, don't send to ask me things that are in your textbook. Don't send to ask me about the upper arm and where the muscle should have been attached because that is in your textbook. That is not something that you have to think about. The picture is in your textbook how it's supposed to attach. There is no way the tricep could have been attached without being a part of the ulna to pull the ulna back. So that type of question, come on, we could have used it. Every time you send something to me, guys, I go and research it. I don't think I'm the keeper of knowledge. I don't just go back and say, oh, I did answer that already. That is the answer. Once you come up with something, I go and I check again, not only in my head, because I am human, I can make mistakes, and that is why I encourage persons to write me and say this is the position or that is the position. And that is why I also encourage you, whomever is the person answering the question paper, please be mindful. They usually have corrections in the description. So not only watch the videos, also look at the description. Remember to find the script for any of my shows. You can go down to the right down there. You are going to see 3 little dots at the side here. Click on the 3 little dots, and you are going to see something say open transcript. Click on that and open transcript. Do not click on flag. You're going to give YouTube too much work. YouTube, I've got to check the video to see if something wrong with it. Don't bother work them because there's no work to do. My videos are all checked by YouTube before they go up, or else I wouldn't be able to monetize. So, we're looking now at sore throat, whether it is sign or symptom, and we're looking at a past paper. And many persons here are saying sign, some persons are saying symptom. All right, so I am going to listen to everybody. Everybody. So I am going to call out some names, and of course you have to support your point. You can't just say it is that or it is that. You must have a reason for saying that. So I'm going to just randomly call some persons. I am going to call on, I'm not going to be calling on my students. I'm going to be calling on Felix. Why is it symptom? And I am not saying that you are wrong. When you're finished, we will treat with that. All right? Why is sore throat a symptom? Let us just remind ourselves. Sign refer to those that you can see or detect. Symptom refer to those that the patient or the person affected would have to tell you about. Is sore throat a sign or a symptom? All right, so Felix, you're going to defend your point. You say that it is a symptom. All right, so Nicola Thompson is saying that it is a sign. You want to defend that for me? Just argue the point, defend the point. That's what this class is about. And come next week, Monday, we are going to have a whole lot, I think, a whole lot of session like this, I think. All right, so I'm waiting on persons to defend their point. If you have not yet liked, share, or subscribe, it might just be time to do so. You are watching Mr. Wilson live, and we're on air on a Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday at 5:05 p.m. We are still cognizant of the fact that next week, Monday, CXC is supposed to send to the regional office the broad topics for the exam. We are also reminded that CXC will be testing you on the entire syllabus for whatever multiple choice paper you are doing. So make sure that you continue to prepare. We are still at section E on the HSB syllabus. We are going to be upping on to section D sometime next week. We're going to be doing a whole big thing on that. You can't go to a HSB exam without knowing about sewage treatment or water. So those things must be there. We must do them before we leave. All right, so Thompson, because you can see it. All right, so Thompson is saying that you can see it. All right, so I want to hear from Felix. Felix, you're not defending your point. Like when they ask you to open your mouth. All right, great. Felix seems that I don't want to take it on. Nobody's going to beat you here. No, this is a very safe space. We never ever bash people here. We fix problems here. We don't try to find time to make people feel embarrassed. All right. We strongly believe. Oh, Felix answered. Sore throat is a symptom because there is an infection. No, Felix. That is not the key, or that is not the rule, or that is not the law that you are going to use. The law that you are going to use to answer this question is pretty much you need to know what is a sign and what is a symptom. A sign refers to that which we can see or detect. And I like to say see or detect because, as it were, for temperature, you can't see temperature, but you can detect it. As it were, for headache, I can't see your headache, but you have to tell me about it. So symptom refer to those that the patient would have to talk about. Now, like Tanisha would have been saying all along, you can see sore throat. So if you go to the doctor and tell the doctor that you have a sore throat, the first thing they're going to tell you, open your mouth, stretch your tongue out. You're going to put something like a fudge stick, I don't know what it is called, on the tongue, shine a flashlight down your throat, and say, oh, you're having a little thing down there. Doctors always say you're having a little thing. You're having a little thing, I'm going to give you something to clear it up. So if you can see it, it is a sign. All right, so let me say the sore throat is a symptom because symptoms are things you feel. Symptoms cannot be seen by others. All right, so I want to argue some more. You fell down and you bruised your knee. Oh, it's called a tongue dispenser. There we go. Amar is a medical person. It's called a tongue dispenser. That foot stick thing that they put on the tongue. Great. You fell down and you bruised your knee, Peter Gay. You can feel the knee burning, right? Is it a sign or a symptom? Waiting on that response. We're arguing the point signs and symptoms. We're arguing a question on my 2020. Is it 2021? No, it's a 2020 multiple choice paper. Tanisha, don't help her. Let Peter Gay. We're arguing the point with Peter Gay. We want her to defend the point. We are trying to ensure that we drive home some stuff. And that was a baby stuff I gave her. I want her to just override it and say, that is nothing at all because I have something else coming. So, as Tanisha said, Peter Gay, it's going to be a sign. And I was expecting you to say that is somewhat different. And then I was going to say to you, okay, sign, something is wrong. So this is where I was going with what I wanted to say, Peter Gay. If you had brushed away what I said about bruising your knee. The problem in your throat is caused by a pathogen. The sore throat is caused by a pathogen in most cases. And if you had a fungus on your skin, it would be itching just the same and could end up in a sore. It would have been the same thing. Now, if you are going to say that you can't see your throat, if you were supposed to be poisoned and there's a bump on your tongue or something like that, would that be sign or symptom? Now, consider the bump or the sore on your tongue to be somewhat similar to the sore throat. Right? So that is my explanation there. However, I still stand open to accept anything new that comes my way. Because when I was going to school back in 500 years ago, we had 9 planets. And as I became older, one of the planets disappeared. So science is this thing that we always have to be listening to persons, even if we think we have the facts. We could talk about some confirmational bias and things that were published in Nature magazine that turned out later not to be true, or things that had to be revised. So don't be afraid to put forward what you have to say. Usually when I have a problem on the paper that I think it is tough and it might not be what you're saying, I usually ask you to leave something in the comment and we can discuss it. So that's a lot we have said this evening. I am very happy as usual to be with you. We're going to be taking our leave now. I think we meet next on Friday. Hopefully on Friday we'll be meeting again. And on Friday, we have a lot to cover. If I start preparing for the class before, then we're going to have more to cover. I start to have to be doing a little more now because I was out for some time and we still need to cover some things on the syllabus. I am even going to be revisiting some things for biology that I did not really do for biology. I'm going to be visiting that. As soon as the broad topics, we would have gotten the broad topics from CXC. I will also publish the diagrams that you are going to need to know for the exam. You'll get a video for that, and we're going to go through that. I like when my students know all the diagrams because a diagram must come. All right, that's it for me for this evening. Thank you very much again for joining. Please be safe, and my friends in St. Vincent, where our heart is with you. We do hope that things will come to norm in short order. And for those persons with COVID, our heart is with you just the same. We really don't understand COVID that much, so we really can't speak much about COVID more than we know that AIDS, COVID, or air pollution will be on the paper because we have the volcano and it's a regional thing. So we pretty much have to look at that. We have to look at asthma and all those things. Take care. Good evening.